What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we'll be launching our new free-to-play series here on MTG Arena. As the new player experience has changed from the last time I did a series like this, I kind of want to do another one of these, kind of see how, if I was playing more casually, how this series may differ from the last time I did this. With that being said, let's just dive into the game and let's just start doing it. So here we are at the main menu right after completing the first initial tutorial that the game launches with that you can't really skip, and it just teaches you the basics of how to play Magic the Gathering. This is where we kind of go into the color challenge, which is another feature of the game that hasn't really changed in the new player experience. We do have a mission down here at the bottom that is complete one color challenge, meaning that we just have to complete one complete color of the color challenge, whether it's the white, the blue, the red, the green, or the black, and get it all the way to the end to completion, and move on to the next step of the new player experience quest line that we can do as much as we want on the daily, but for the sake of the video, I'm only going to complete 2 chapters per day, and I'm going to do a little bit more casually, as a casual player will do this rather than do it all in one said video. Another thing to note, with this being a new account, I don't have any wild cards, I don't have any gold, I don't have any gems. The packs that it's saying I do have are all the packs that you get for free in the mail when you start a brand new account. So as you see here, it goes all the way back to Brothers War Alchemy, and we have 6 packs of that, and then 3 of everything else, except for Wild's Level Drain, which I did get rewarded a pack as it did start me out at level 2. So I guess doing the tutorial added some experience there, or since the creation of this account, there was some free experience rewarded for some sort of way. I'm not 100% sure why I'm at level 2 and got that one initial free pack of Wild's Level Drain. But with that being said, I will dive into the color challenge. And like I said, I would probably just pick my favorite color. We're going to probably do blue. I do think the blue deck's pretty interesting. For the most part, these starter decks aren't really the most exciting, as they are just basics of various ways. The blue deck is focused on flying creatures and drawing cards and taking advantage of that. The white deck is life gain. The green deck is some ramp into some big creatures. The black deck is kind of like recursion, as well as if things get destroyed, you get some +1/+1 counters, or if they get dealt damage, you get +1/+1 counters. And then the red deck is aggro, kind of haste, plays a bunch of creatures, tries to get wide and deal damage that way. So we do get to do this. We do have to go through 5 set things. And each one of these things, except for the last one, are kind of like predetermined. You're going to draw X amount of cards, and you're going to kind of learn some mechanics with how the deck works until you get to the last chapter. And in this last chapter, we actually will play against a real player. And I will say that this system has gotten a little bit better, because before, when you played against a real player, you had to actually join the play queue with a starter deck, and sometimes you got paired with players who are playing much better decks than a starter deck, and you would just get steamrolled. Now, since there is a new whole starter deck challenge area, you then are more likely to play against players who are also playing starter decks, because I believe that's where you get queued for when it comes to this part of the challenge. So as I said before, this challenge here, we are playing against the AI. Our hand is kind of predetermined of what it's trying to do here. No matter how many times you probably do this challenge, you probably end up with the same set of hand. So if we put down an island, we're going to try to do certain things and try to use certain mechanics. Some of the cards you see out on the battlefield, our opponent normally would not have in the monocolor decks, as I do think some of these do take from older decks that were once in the game but are no longer. And in this scenario, we just kind of want to play our hand in a certain way. I would say this Warden is probably the most effective card, because next turn, for example, we can now go ahead and we can play 2 Cloudkin Seers and draw 2 cards while also having blockers. We can also play our 4-drop, which is, not too bad, but I do think playing these and getting some card advantage is always very good. Plus, next turn we then get to hit for a very big attack. We could also have played that, which is a possibility, but I do think we are in a good spot, even though I missed that there. We are just going to take that hit. As much as, that's only 3 points of damage or 4 points of damage, we are still way ahead with how our board state is. We're going to start off with this card, because it's going to make all our other guys cost less. And then we're going to play this. It's going to buff our board. And then we can swing in for 9 points of damage. And essentially at this point, unless our opponent has something to get rid of this, our board state is in a good spot that we can still attack all and be perfectly fine. We also drew another Windstorm Drake. Nothing too crazy. And then we can draw a bunch of cards for the sake of it, even though this doesn't matter. This is just BM for the most part, because we clearly have 1 at this point of the game. Or we drew all the way into an unsummon. The skies are clear. And we swing in for a whole bunch of damage and challenge 1 complete in blue. So with the completion of each one of these challenges, we will get cards that get added into our blue deck over the course of this challenge. Now, I know it didn't say any of that, but I believe that's still how this works. So we are going to move on to the green in this, and then we're going to, do that and play our deck and maybe draw a different hand that kind of works a certain way against the green deck. Green is also the archetype that does have creatures with reach that, if you don't know what reach is, it's essentially an ability that allows them to block creatures with flying. But for the most part, these challenges I feel like are kind of predetermined. As you see here, we have 3 lands in hand, so we probably want to scry that to the bottom. This is just trying to get the basics of how certain mechanics of the game work. And as you see there, we are kind of rewarded as we do draw into a card that's going to make our creatures cost less. Our mono green player is going to ramp up, so it is not 100% the best thing for us. But I do think if we can get this out and then get these out next turn, we are going to have a good advantage of having enough to basically overwhelm our opponent in the skies even before they get anything big on the ground. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I do think this is a deck that's going to play the Spider here, that it will have reach and is a 4/4. And there we go. There is the Spider. And they also do, because of the Spider, they do these trees do actually produce 4 mana. Our 2 additional mana, our 1 additional mana, so they each would produce 2. So it is fairly good there. We are just going to bounce the Spider back. We're just going to swing in the air. We are just going to pass. Our opponent may just tap out again, play the Spider. Our opponent doesn't really have too much going on here. We could bounce it back. We could wait till end of turn. They can't actually replay it because they're missing 1 mana. We're now able to play another land. We now play a big old 4/6, which is good for us. Next turn could be a little troublesome because they'll probably replay their big 4/4 Spider, but this guy has an ability that we can tap 7 mana and make this so it can't be blocked. And then we also have flyers, so we are in position to pretty much have a good advantage on this attack, even if we lose one of our flyers in the process. All right, so now playing against the mono white deck, the one thing we got to look out for is that this deck is all about getting +1/+1 counters based on life gain. So if we can mitigate anything like that, we do have unsummon here. We probably don't want to do it immediately once they play that life gain creature. But once that creature starts getting counters on it and they're able to attack in with it, that's probably when we want to bounce it. This card is kind of troublesome because of the fact that it can pretty much kill this if we do attack in with it. We could play the flyer if we wanted to and draw a card and maybe go from there. So it is one of those things that we could attack in effectively. But I think I'm just going to hold back. It is definitely tough here. You could make them sacrifice this and throw it into the 3/2, which I think I'll do actually. Because now I'm thinking to myself as well, the white deck does play auras, so if they put any auras onto it, that's going to give it +2/+2 or +1/+1. Like that. They don't have a proper target for it, and they buff our creatures, so we're going to kill them faster, which is kind of a unique and interesting kind of play, I would say, that they took. And our opponent's going to buff our creatures again, so now we have a 6/5, which, yet again, seems interesting overall. And now they pacify it. I guess they're just full of auras. We're going to bounce our creature back. All the auras will go away, but now we're able to actually draw a card this turn off of the bounce creature. And then it's able to be attacked again. We have another unsummon. Nothing to unsummon here, so we're just going to keep our creature out, see where it goes. They have another 1/1. It's not too scary just yet. We have this rare here that will basically bounce a creature an opponent controls back to their hand, and it is a 5/5, so we will do that. Probably this turn we'll bounce their creature. And pretty much they'll have to replay it again, and then next turn we could possibly bounce stuff, do whatever. If our opponent does have another pacify, that's perfectly fine. I don't know why they buffed our creature. This is an aura that, for some reason, they should be buffing their creature, but I guess they're like, nah, let's not do that. We're going to draw with another Cloud Conceer. Might as well draw with another Cloud Conceer. We have the thing that's going to buff our guy. We will just attack in. And more than likely on their combat, we're just gonna bounce their creature because they probably will swing, as the AI is just aggressive in that sense, even though the play does not make the most sense. I could also take 2. It's not that big of a deal either, but our creatures are in the air, so them flying over is not a big deal as well. So we are just gonna buff our creatures. We'll swing in. Our opponent next turn does not have a good attack if they were, but we were able to kill them basically easily. And didn't have to worry about bouncing anything, but overall, very solid victory. All right, so next up we are against the mono red deck. So what we need to do here is kind of protect our stuff, also get some threats out on the battlefield. And the way our hand is set up is that we have this spell here that we don't immediately have to cast here, but if our opponent decides to target any of our creatures with a spell that tries to kill it, we can target our creature and give it hexproof, which then negates that, and also give it +0/+3, which is also good for blocking. There's a strong possibility that they could play a 1-drop 1/1 haster, but they do have the 1/1. If it becomes blocked, it creates a goblin. We're just gonna play our 2/1 here. Our opponent's gonna attack. We're not gonna block. 1 point of damage this early is not a big deal, as we losing 1 life this early is not 100% the biggest problem. We're gonna play another 2/1. We'll have it unsummoned just in case. This is one of the cards that we probably have to worry about, is whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we get to put a +1/+1. They get put a +1/+1 counter on this, so this is one of those cards that will grow. But as of right now, it's not a big threat. We'll let that go. We're not going to block. Instead, we're just going to bounce their creature back to their hand, making them replay it again. And the reason why I don't get rid of this by blocking is that will create a 1/1 goblin token in replace. So that's something that we don't really want to have happen. We're going to play a Cloud Conceer. He'll buff our dudes. We'll draw a card. We'll swing in for a total of 6, putting our opponent down to 18. More than likely, our opponent will play their 2/2 again. We're not going to block. So this is a unique position because we could play our Drake, which then basically buffs our team. We could also play a Glint if they think they're going to block. I'm going to play the Drake because this will give the most damage out on our opponent and make them have to make a decision if they want to block with the weird here, because these are 3/2s and this is a 3/1. So we'll swing in the block, which is good for us, meaning that we traded very well. Now there's a possibility our opponent could have a spell. They have Act of Treason. They decide to play it against themselves, and they're also going to shock us. Very interesting, unique line of play that normally most people would not play. Not sure what the program read there to do. But as it seems like the opponent doesn't know the AI does not know how to properly use their cards. Whereas like Act of Treason would have been a good play if they decided to, take one of our creatures while we had no mana open. But we're done with our mono red opponent, and now we're going to move on to playing against, I believe, this is where we play against our first real life opponent with our new deck. Now, this challenge here is one of those things that we could win, we could lose, and we still complete it either way. Like I said before, we are actually in a queue, and I assume that means we're in actually the new starter deck queue that exists in the game. So this is actually a real player who is not an AI. And they're going to be playing one of the many starter decks that the game does offer. Our hand is interesting. It's not the fastest hand. It does have some early mitigation, but we do also have a mulligan if we want to take it. But for now, we're just going to keep and go from there. We do have an unsummoned to kind of, keep the tempo in our favor early on if there's something that's a big threat. And our opponent does decide to mulligan. And they more than likely have to decide what they want to put back or if they want to mulligan again. And they mulligan again, going down to 5. And now they would have to put back 2 cards. There's also a possibility that our opponent may just scoop if they don't have a good 5-card hand. Personally, in these kind of matches, I don't think there's a ton of high stakes. We're not playing ranked or anything. We're just playing our first ever real opponent. So I think keeping any sort of hand, as long as there's a couple lands and some playables, you're kind of good. And our opponent's already going to probably go off to the timer, which is very interesting here for a new player experience. This is not one of those things you experience you want to experience as a new player, but it is something that does exist where people will just sit and not do anything. The one thing I probably would say for like a new player experience thing when you're new to the game is probably like doing a free mulligan, kind of like some other the events that do where you can mulligan your opening hand for free and not have be penalized for it. So that is one of those things I do think they could implement, and then you go to the regular mulligan rule after the first one. And it does look like our opponent's playing like the mono green deck. Possibly, there's also a possibility that they could be playing one of the other decks that exist with green in it, but it does seem, because it's 2 back-to-back lands, that it is just going to be mono green. And our hope is next turn to draw a land, as our hand is kind of unplayable outside of the Winged Words and the Unsummon. And they draw their 4/2 Trampler. So we did draw the land, which is good. We could play the Octopus, which I think is pretty fine. We get the Scry 2, kind of send ourselves up. I'm actually going to keep both of these on top, but I want the land next turn because I can play this. And we'll just swing for 2. And now our opponent has to make a tough choice if they want to attack in against a 3/3. It does have trample, so even if we block with a 3/3, we will still take 1 point of damage. And then they play a 4/4. So there's another play we can make here. I could take 4 points of damage going down to 16. I could block and take 1. I think I'll just do that because we'll draw cards while our opponent will slowly run out of cards, because we have ways of drawing more cards with Winged Words, and we'll take that action, bounce their creature, swing for 2, and we still have a 5/5, which is definitely very hard for our opponent to deal with. And next turn we can draw 2 cards with Winged Words. Our opponent's going to play a 3/3 Baloth. If there was another one of those, it would get +1/+1. But we're going to start off with this. We're going to draw 2 cards. And then we'll just swing for 7, putting our opponent down to 9 already. And I think I'm just going to actually draw 2 more cards. And we get a wall, which is pretty solid. So now this wall is very good because it's going to scry for us. We'll keep. Having additional cards is always good. Or have an additional land, because that means we can play more spells. And our opponent's essentially in danger of losing here because they don't have a lot of good plays. They can't really attack well. If they do attack, we'll block. But we'll still swing for 7 in the air. So they really have to figure out a way to deal with our board state. We'll block. We'll pass the damage. And it'll be my turn. So we'll start off with this. We'll play another one of these. It doesn't really help our board state in any sort of way that's really impactful. We'll make our opponent tap all the creatures. Now they don't untap during the next turn, so they don't actually even have any good attacks. And we will say go. And basically our opponent has to remove all of our flyers from really doing anything, or we win the game with the next swing. And their creatures are tapped, so they can't even attack. They have a giant spider, and we have a spell that bounces it back to their hand. So sometimes you want to hold on to cards like that. Sometimes you want to just immediately dump them. But in that sense, since we had multiples on summons, we just waited for the right cards, and we just bounced them back when we needed to. And there goes the first chapter of the new player experience completed. As you see here, we got our first bit of gold. We got a little bit of XP that goes towards the battle pass that gets released with every set, and we did get some sleeves for our cards, so they don't just have the blank, Magic the Gathering logo on the back. So we'll put those on, and we'll claim. And as you see here, Sparky will come in and tell us that we're going on our next step of the journey, which is to test our skills against Sparky, our AI computer opponent, and complete the Sparky challenge. So as you see here, we have a new event here. The other thing too, like I said before, the game is a little bit more simplified. So if we go to events, all we have here to see is just Sparky Challenge and Color Challenge, or we only have play against a bot. We don't have any way to play any other modes, which is definitely very good as being at a point in a new player experience. You don't want to be immediately thrown into the play queue or the rank queue where people are playing decks that they may have custom built, and we're still gathering ourselves and trying to figure out what we want to do. So we're going to dive into the Sparky Challenge. And this is another interesting event. It is kind of unique in the sense that most events do cost some sort of currency. This event is free. We do have a choice of playing one of 3 decks here. We can play one of each of them in each match, and our goal here is just to win against Sparky. And Sparky's going to play monocolored decks, while we get to use some of the new dual decks that get released every year when a new standard set season happens. So we just had one. These are the latest and greatest standard decks. We have a red-green deck, we have a white-blue deck, and we have a white-black deck. Not the most diverse in the sense that 2 decks share a color, and I guess the green-red deck is the only unique one out of it. But another overall pretty interesting, way to play. We hit start down here. Like I said, this event is free. We don't have to pay for it. And we can choose our deck. And I'm just going to play through each one for each game. I'm going to start off with this one, as I do think this is actually a pretty solid deck. This is the Soldier deck, blue-white soldiers. So it is something that is similar to a deck that people do play. And we're just playing against Sparky, who's playing some of the monocolor decks of the game, where they have slightly different cards than the actual monocolor decks, but for the most part, it is the same. And our hand's not terrible. It's not great. But we do have a dual land, and we do have some creatures that we can play early at flash speed, so it's not bad in that sense. And we'll just play our tap land out of the way first, just so we gain a little bit of life, and we don't have to worry about having to play that later. And our opponent's playing the mono red deck, which is on the aggressive side, so they are going to come at us. We could play something, but these have flash, so we're gonna wait and see what our opponent does. And we're gonna flash them out if they decide to attack. And now we'll flash it out. If they have a response, then they can play the response, but we do have a blocker. And if they want to waste one of their spells to make it so their creature doesn't die, it's perfectly fine with me. I'm still not worried about what's happening on the battlefield. I'm just going to continue doing how I was doing before. Ambush the Paratrooper again. They're going to tap out this time, which means our block is going to be a lot better. So we're going to flash this in. We're going to block, kill their creature, and our creature in the air still lives. So this is an interesting land as it comes in the battlefield, enters the battlefield tapped unless reveal a soldier card this way, or if I control a soldier. So I'm going to reveal the soldier I'm going to play, but we're going to play this. We have a 3/4 soldier that's going to buff our other soldiers, and we're just going to attack in the air. We do definitely have the advantage on the board with our power. Our opponent's going to play a creature that creates 2 additional goblins, but they don't really have any good attacks. We are going to play Harbin, which is another great flyer. We're just going to attack in for 2 in the air, and we're just going to end turn. If we can get 1 additional land here, we can actually tap 5 and give all our soldiers +1/+1. We get the additional land. We'll give our opponent a little bit of life, but we'll get rid of some of their small creatures. They'll get a bit of life out of it. But Raid Bombardment's an interesting card in the sense of creatures with power 2 or less attack. It deals 1 damage to each player or planeswalker that player is attacking. So if they swung with these creatures, we get dealt 2 damage even before block. So we're just going to attack in the air, and we'll go put them back down to the same life total. But we decide to get rid of their battlefield in the sense that they wouldn't take advantage of the bombardment. Now, the one awkward thing I would say with this deck is that we did not draw our any of our other soldiers, so we're kind of limited here. Harbin's one of these things. If we attack with 5 or more soldiers, all our creatures will gain +1/+1 in flying. We only have 3, and we have no way to produce additional soldiers. I'm just going to continue to attack in the air. It doesn't matter. I can do the land or I can do this card. I'm just going to use this ability, buff our soldiers, get damage in that way. And essentially next turn, we can score the victory if our opponent doesn't have any answers. They don't do anything, which is perfectly fine. We're going to play a soldier. This is a card that is alchemy only, comes in the battlefield. Whenever we cast our next creature spell, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. We have no hand, but we basically score the victory. Our opponent's going to double block. That's perfectly fine. We're going to not kill them, but it's fine. It's Sparky. Sparky's not going to kill us here. We're going to gain a little bit of life. We'll swing in, and we'll use the beachhead. I got the mana wrong. I thought I had mana open. Our opponent's going to double block again. Still fine. But they're dead anyway. And we completed our first victory. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch decks now to one of these other decks. I'll do the red-green deck here. We'll double-click it. We can take a look at it. We can hit the craft all button, which I do not recommend. We're going to hit claim. I guess I didn't claim the prize. That's why I couldn't switch to the other deck. It looks like we got ourselves a Goblin Lord here from Dominaria. So we're going to click this deck. We're going to submit this deck. So now we're going to be playing the red-green deck in the next matchup. And all this is really here for is not really to unlock the starter decks. This is more to introduce you to other deck types as you move on from the color challenge. So we're just going to play the tap lane out of the way. Our hand is a little bit slow. We could have mulliganed there. So that is something I probably regret not doing, as we draw a card that's not going to help us this early. So we'll just play another tap land. We'll develop our mana base. Our opponent's not really doing anything too crazy. They're going to hit us for 1. We draw another fight spell, which is not very helpful in this situation. They're going to play another flyer. They're going to draw a card. But yet again, it's Sparky. It's not anything too crazy. Not too much in damage. So we draw the card that is on the deck box. So we do have a 4/4 Trample Haster. We can buff it, and then whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls or a battle that player controls. Not the most effective here. We do have this card here. It's a 3/3 that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, that creature gets +2/+0 in haste. It's just a 2/3 flyer that for 1 we can give a +1/+0. This ability is activated 4 more times. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So I do think we'll play this because that will kind of shut off their air game and then make them have an answer. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. And Sparky's kind of broken, I guess, because Sparky unsummoned their own creature. Not really sure what the play was there, but they decided to do it that way. But I guess they want to set up possibly replaying the bird to buff this next turn. I'm not really sure what the reason behind that was. This card is interesting. It's a 1 mana card that, if it was kicked, enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. Also has haste. And for 3 mana, we can give a +2/+0. I don't think that's the most effective way to use our mana. I could play some of my fight spells and remove some of their board state. Like this will give my creature +1/+2 and make it fight something. This one will just make it deal damage. So I do think we maybe do that. I know it's not the most exciting play, but we'll just clean up Sparky's board. This is not going to happen. We'll do this and kill off the Cloudkin Seer, and then we'll swing it for 3. I'm not worried about. We're going to take in 1 point of damage here. They're going to play the bird, which they unsummoned, and they're going to play another bird. So that was their big 5-head play there. Sometimes Sparky makes good moves, and then sometimes Sparky makes weird moves, and that was one of those. We'll play the 3/3, and we'll swing in. Our opponent's probably not going to block, right? So we'll spend the extra mana since we could cast a creature, but we'd rather kick that card if we need to and just get the extra point of damage in. That's fine. So we have a couple plays here. We can Convoke, which is an interesting ability. Meaning we can tap our creatures to cast this spell instead of paying mana for it. So we only have 5 mana. We can tap our 2 creatures and play this card essentially for 7 for only paying 5. We could play our Dinosaur, which is not a bad play. It's a 4/4 that has trample and haste. We could kill something. We could play this and kick it. Which is another interesting play, but it's not the best play. I do think probably getting this out is probably good, and then we can also give it +2/+0 because of this, and then we can attack him pretty effectively with these because they can't kill this in the process, and we get some points of damage in. And they decide to take all of it. So we'll just buff this and deal 9 to them. They're at 5. Sparky does not make the smartest plays ever, so I do think the one problem with Sparky, it's not a very good way to gauge where your skill level is overall in the game very early. We're going to play this and kick it. Might as well. It's going to come in as a 3/3, and now as a 5/3. We'll have this, deal damage to the wall, and we will just swing out. And our opponent can only block 2 things, and Sparky decides just to take it all because Sparky realizes the inevitable. All right, and we move on to the last chapter of the Sparky challenge. We are going to switch to the Phyrexia deck here, the white-black deck, and finish it out. And at the end here, we'll get a cosmetic. So we will see what that is. All right, so our opponent's going to go first. Our hand is all right. We do have playables. We do have removal. All this stuff is pretty decent for the most part, so we are going to keep. We are probably going to play this on turn 1, so we can follow it up with our turn 2 play. And it looks like Sparky is playing mono black. So one of the more challenging decks here because it has things like Death Touch, which makes some of our attacks not as good because this rat will kind of try to eliminate our things. And because I don't really have a turn 3 play, I actually decided to play the untap land here first. I can play the Inquisitor, which is interesting. I could also play this 2/3 Lifelinker if I wanted to. I think I'm going to start off with the Lifelinker because it does make them only want to attack when the 1/1, and it blocks the 2/1 very, very well. Yeah, we'll block. We'll get rid of the rat. If they want to get it back later, they're going to pay for it. This I'm not really worried about because I can Ossification, essentially exile it until it leaves the battlefield. So I'm still in a pretty good position, even though it doesn't seem that way. So since I do think I'm just going to play this tap land, I do think that's a better play. I am going to... I think I'm just going to Ossify their 2/2 and just take 2. I'm at 22. I'm not really worried about dying immediately. So this like 2/1 and 2/2 aren't really super effective with what I have. I will play the white land. I'll play this. This has a very interesting ability called Incubate. It's from March of the Machines. Essentially, it makes this incubator token that I can pay 2 mana to transform it into a 2/2 based on how many counters it has on it. And whenever a permanent I control transforms into a Phyrexian, I get to put an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So pretty interesting for the most part of how like that works. And you know, maybe not against Sparky, who's also going to destroy their own creature. It's a pretty effective way to catch your opponent off guard if they're not paying attention to your open mana, and what you could do with it. So we are going to activate this. We are going to make it a 3/3, and we are just going to block their 2/2. Which is a pretty unique way of doing some removal as a combat trick. We are also going to cast our probably most powerful spell in the deck, which is Gix. Whenever our creature we control deals damage, we may pay 1 life, and if we do, we get to draw a card, so we have 2 creatures. So basically, we are going to be able to draw 2 cards out of this by losing some life in the process, which I'll take the action on both. Because we're at such a high life total, and we're only playing Sparky, I'm not really worried about it. And I'm just going to pass turn. I could have played the 2/3 if I wanted to, but it's not the most effective way to probably use our mana there because this 2/3 could get something back if it does end up in the graveyard. So I do think not doing that is probably good. And here we'll play this. I think I'll just ossify their 2/1 or their flyer. It doesn't really matter. We'll get rid of the flyer because that will grow while the other ones won't. I could also be mean and also get rid of their creature. Typically, you want to play instants at instant speed, but because they don't have any cards in hand, might as well get it out of the way before they draw something. And we deal a whole 7 damage, and I can draw 3 cards if I wanted to, which I'll do. Just fill our hand right back up with a whole bunch of cards. But at this point, essentially, Sparky has already lost the match because the way the Sparky deck works, sometimes it will just draw a bunch of lands and we basically win from there. Unfortunately, I don't have any good way of pushing 2 additional damage. Other than this one, this would just allow us to put an additional +1/+1 counter on our creature, which is something, but it's not the greatest. And we swing in for a total of 7. Our opponent's down to 1. Sure, I mean, these cards really don't matter. We're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to just do this twice because I'm not going to take a life to draw an additional card that I'm going to have to discard anyway. Sure. Our opponent drew removal. That only destroys our small thing. And pretty much we just win right here on the swing. And that is the Sparky Challenge complete. All right, we're going to set these as our default, claim it, get some coins, get some XP, hit claim, get our cosmetic from the end, which is up the beanstalk, a very unique cosmetic. This card has seen some play actually in a lot of formats, so it's kind of cool. We got our cosmetic is that. And we go back to the main screen, and we do see what our next challenge lies ahead of us, which I will do on the next video, but it is play in the starter deck duel games, which is a new game mode the game has introduced, and we do get a Vivian sleeve and 600 gems, which is pretty solid. Also, we have unlocked our daily quests that we can reroll by simply clicking on one of them. We can only reroll one of them per day, and this is another way that we're going to build up some currency. As our currency has, is slowly going to go up over the course of this video series. We still don't have any wild cards, but we do have 1,000 gold now, which is useful to do events and buy packs in game. I did also redeem the packs on the account before I start recording, so I do have all the packs that the game sends you in the in-game mail from Brothers War Alchemy forward. So I do have all these packs. Probably towards the point when I start creating decks, I will actually open these packs. I will also add in some of the codes for the packs for the sets that I don't have redeemed here, as you can still go all the way back to, I believe, Ikoria for packs to get some free currency and as well as cards that can be used in decks overall. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I know this new player challenge is not the most exciting at the beginning because a lot of it is kind of very fundamental. Nothing's really too crazy or challenging, maybe compared to some of the later game stuff when you actually have a more competitive deck and the games are maybe need a little bit more, whereas this is a lot of teaching and kind of learning. If you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit that like button. If you're new here, when I post new videos like this one here on the channel, hit that subscribe button. But with that being said, I'll see you in the next video.